everyone, and welcome to this video today where I'm going to be talking about how to be a witch or a Wiccan or whatever you want to be in this day and age. So this video is going to be focused on my personal practices and how I sort of came into what I'm doing today. And it's very much my own research, my own views on this subject. So I just hope I inspire some of you to follow your own path, whether it's being a Wiccan or a Pagan or a witch or a sorcerer. Like, you can be whatever you want to be these days. So we're pretty blessed in most countries, I would say, to be able to practice what we want to practice. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is the Eclectic Witch, and I am going to be talking about the confusion that is surrounding some of the terminology with witchcraft, paganism, and Wicca in particular. So I guess I want to talk about a little bit about my own practice and how I got to where I am today. So if you're a beginner witch or you're a beginner Wiccan or you're just a little bit confused about how you want to label yourself, first of all, I will say don't get too hung up on labels when you're first starting out. So that is really, really important. I didn't get hung up on any words or labels because I just enjoyed doing what I was doing, and I was really, I guess, learning and experiencing different aspects of what we deem as witchcraft or divination in today's society. So when I started out, I absolutely loved tarot, and I was totally drawn to tarot from a very young age, and I read lots of books about tarot and I studied it, and I loved the drawings, I loved the symbolism, and for me, the tarot, and to this day, it really still speaks to me. So you might have something that you absolutely love. Like, you might love astrology, you might love cooking and you do witch's cookery, you might like herbs, like you might be really drawn to mediumship, and you consider yourself maybe a hedge witch or something like that. So there's a lot of astro travel, I think, with hedge witches. So it's really, you will find what you're drawn to most, and that's what I think is the most important thing when it comes to exploring this area. Is don't think of it as I have to label myself, and within that label I have to like this or I have to like that. So if you're someone who loves astrology and you consider yourself like more of like a cosmic witch, you might still like tarot, you might still like cooking as well. So really, sometimes what happens is with labels, you can try and control it a little bit, and you try to stay within that label. So that's what I would encourage you, is not to be too fixated on labels when you're first starting out. So I remember, for example, when I was a really young kid, I loved dressing up as a witch with my cousins, and I used to play the game Witches. So I think it's important to play and have fun, and I also encourage you to read. So read books that really interest you. Like, if you think you're a starseed and you're someone who really relates to the cosmos and that is your path, you might really get interested into like astrology and things like that, and that path might open up into something more and more as time goes on for you. So I really would say play, read, and I encourage you to not get too hung up on labels when you're first starting out. Explore and have fun, and really this is what it's all about. So who's to say you have to be a certain way when it's your own personal practice? So that's what I would really encourage you to do when you're first starting out. So following on from what I've been talking about with labels, I wouldn't be getting too hung up on them, but it is worth noting history and how history has developed some of the words and the terminology, because a lot of this, to be honest, has changed over time. So a pagan back in history is different to pagans now, so more commonly referred to nowadays as neo-pagans. So basically modern pagans. So back in history, the word pagan, for example, etymologists believe pagan, the term, came from the word paganus. So pagus was referred to a small portion of rural land or a village, and pagan was a civilian or a villager residing in that small portion of land. And originally the word wasn't used in a religious sense, and it was just referred to more of a, a pagan was a country hick, for example. As time went on within the Roman Empire, Christianity was recognized as a religion within the Roman Empire, and the Christians would call the villagers pagans, and it became more of a religious term because they believed in the old gods and they didn't believe in Christianity. So there was a segregation, you can see here. Over time, in the 20th century, we had Wiccans. Wiccans came about and they practiced the old pagan beliefs and traditions and practiced witchcrafts, and they called themselves Wiccans, and they were often in covens in England that were in secret, so practicing in secret. And they were very, very much inspired by Margaret Murray and her books about the witches and witchcraft and the trials as well, and how that in those days that the pagans weren't devil worshippers and they weren't evil, and it was very misunderstood. So she wanted to clarify that these religions weren't evil. So the Wiccans were really inspired by Margaret Murray in particular. Over time, I think it was around about the 1940s, Gerald Gardner was really also inspired by Margaret Murray and the revival of the old beliefs, the old gods, and Wicca. So he made it publicly known that he was initiated into, I think it was called the New Forest Coven, and then he formed his own tradition, and it was sort of, his tradition was inspired by lots of different like occult theories and from his travels as well. And I think he was also inspired by Aleister Crowley. And so he formed his own tradition, which was the Gardnerian tradition. And he was quite responsible for the revival of Wicca that we see nowadays. And it spread across the world as well. So I actually listened to a podcast, and there's a beautiful Wiccan that I listen to, and it's called, I really actually encourage you to listen to her. It's called Seeking Witchcraft, and I listen to her on Spotify, and it's about her story as a Wiccan in a coven, but she also calls herself a witch. So, she uses the term interchangeably anyway. And what it's like to be in a coven, practicing the Gardnerian tradition that Gerald Gardner started. So it's actually quite fascinating. So if you think about history, sorry about that long spiel, but history and how it's developed and how Wicca has developed, it was definitely more of a belief in a religion, because they really recognize in particular two deities, so the god and the goddess. Very much inspired by the horned god that was really worshipped all those years ago, that the pagans worshipped. And but they recognize, more importantly, a lot of deities. So the Gardnerian tradition, I believe, is the god and the goddess, and they talk about the wheel of the year and the Sabbats, and how the goddess gives birth to the god, and it's the cycle of life through the wheel. So it's very, very fascinating, very interesting. And a lot of Wiccans though, however, they might worship another god or another goddess that they really, really respect. And they also celebrate the Sabbats as well. So it's very, it gets very grey and it gets very confusing. But if you think about it, Wicca, you don't have to practice witchcraft within the Wiccan tradition. It really is up to you whether you do it or not. If you celebrate the Sabbats and that's all you do, that's great. That's fine. It comes down to you and your personal practice and what you wish to do. So there's no real hard and fast rules. So you'll hear that there's also Christian witches, for example, and they recognize Mother Mary or God, and they practice witchcraft within their own home, within their own practices, but they recognize themselves religiously as a Christian. So there's a lot of debate about this. Looking at my own experiences, I really respect many different cultures, the indigenous culture. I grew up as Catholic. I lived in Dubai where there is Muslims. I've also been really interested in Buddhism as well. So I think it's really comes down to you. I would really recommend at the end of the day, you do your own research when it comes to this sort of subject. So, but I do want to recommend a book, Sunwise. So this is the sacred wheel of the year in Australia, because often there is many books that will talk about how the celebrations are for the certain dates and times in the Northern Hemisphere, but not for the Southern Hemisphere. So for those who are interested in learning about the Sabbats and the Wheel of the Year, I really recommend you get this book, and I will also link it in my description as well. So I really hope that clarifies a little bit about the history and the words, but really at the end of the day, pagan is an umbrella term, and a pagan can basically worship two gods, god and goddess, or many deities. So one or two deities or many deities. And really when that comes to Wicca, Wicca is the same. Wicca recognizes two deities or many deities. And it comes under the umbrella term, but Wicca has its really recognizes specific traditions, I would say. And especially when it comes to the celebrations of the Wheel of the Year and the Baron-Reid, and a lot of Wiccans, let's be honest, practice witchcraft. But I think it's important to segregate a little bit about what is a practice and what is a religion. So it goes really pagan, and then it goes Wiccan, falls under that sort of that banner of religion, and then you've got as a practice witchcraft. So that's how I would really, I guess, at the end of the day, explain it. And I hope that, look, I'm always doing research, I'm always reading about this sort of thing as well, and I'm always learning. At the end of the day, I really believe it's up to you. It's up to you guys. Do what makes you feel happiest and what you resonate with most. So there is really no hard and fast rules when it comes to your own practice and that. So I would just really encourage you to read books, read what you're interested in, and use your intuition when it comes to this, because that is always going to set you on the right path. And this is what it's all about. Religion or spirituality or Wicca or paganism, whether, you know, we're all different. So really at the end of the day, that's I think that's what is the most important thing, is to show who you are in yourself and be authentic with yourself and who you are and what you love most.